Hi, everyone, and welcome back. I'm Karen Deckard. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Retail Management Solutions, and I'm here today with our special guest, Emily Cannata, who is a pharmacy industry expert, business coach, and consultant. Thanks for joining us today, Emily.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Awesome. So Brad asked me to step out from behind the scenes today, which I'm super thrilled about, to see you all in person. So to chat with Emily and share some actionable ways that pharmacies can market to customers to communicate value. But what we're really here to talk today about is preventing attrition. Mark Cuban's new Cost Plus Drugs initiative is one of the many online options that could represent a loss of business for local brick and mortar pharmacies. And a lot of you are already feeling the squeeze. So this is just one more thing to worry about. And marketing, it plays maybe a small role in that. But it's not really what's at the core of communicating your value to customers. So I asked Emily to join us today and share some of what she's seeing in the pharmacy industry and some of the best practices that pharmacies might consider. So let's just go ahead and get started if that's good with you, Emily.
Absolutely.
All right.
So, the message that I'm hearing across the country is there's a really vastly different way that people are understanding or concerned about Mark Cuban's Cost Plus Drug Company. I have heard people in it's a game changer arena, and then I've heard others that are like, whatever, it's another Amazon, who cares? It's not going to affect my business. So it kind of depends on who you're talking to as to the reaction that you get. So I would definitely say that overarchingly, right, it's a noble cause to want Americans to pay less for their prescription medications. I think that is, without a doubt, we can all agree that is a noble cause and an important cause, and something that your local pharmacist has been fighting that fight for you since the whole PBM situation started in the 90s. So pharmacy benefit managers are ultimately the biggest issue, but I do not recommend creating a campaign to educate your customers on pharmacy benefit managers. It's going to be spin your wheels, and they're not going to get it anyways. So that's not a solution we're going to offer for you today, is to educate your customers on PBMs. But you definitely don't want to wait for the conversation to come to you, right? I would recommend that you prepare for it. You know what your message is, and you communicate it clearly. So making the plan, what is the value that you bring to your customers that any of these, Mark Cuban's company, Amazon, what's the value that you bring that they cannot ever bring? So know what that is and be able to communicate it clearly. You want to understand that message, and you want to be able to have everybody on your team have a unified message around that. So come up with your plan of what you want to say, educate your team first, and then come up with a plan of how you plan to disseminate that information to the public. Is it going to be, that direct messaging, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit, or indirect messaging, or a combination? So that's the initial first step.
Right, for sure. Yeah, and I think part of crafting that message is really understanding the message that Cost Plus Drugs is putting out there. If you look at their website, if you look at marketing, if you look at some of the social posts that are out there on people trying to explain it to other people that aren't on the inside, they're really lumping pharmacies in with everyone. They the so-called middlemen, even though that's not the case. And they're really trying to commoditize what a retail pharmacy or an independent local pharmacy does for their customers. So unless you're going to battle on price, which is, that's not the battle I don't think most pharmacies will want to have, if anybody. You have to focus on value and what you bring to the table. So kind of with that in mind, what are some of the ways that a pharmacy might communicate their value as compared with an online pharmacy, without directly approaching it? Or do you think a direct approach is better?
Well, yeah, let's talk about direct and indirect approaches, and then we can talk about messaging.
Sounds good.
I think, a direct approach would be having a sign, in-store signage. Ask me about Mark Cuban's Cost Plus Drug Company, or something at the register. I think Brad mentioned that having a sign at the register is a very direct, in-your-face approach. That might work for some. If attrition is a huge problem and you see customers going out the door, that could potentially be an approach you want to take. But maybe not, right? Like that might create more attention towards the program than would normally have occurred. So keep that in mind. If there's a lot of buzz in your community, maybe you want that type of in-your-face approach, maybe not. Another, directly would be, direct email campaign, sending out newsletters, social media posts, on all the various social media platforms that your pharmacy utilizes. And then, of course, there's the indirect approach, which is the message that you want your team to send to your customers, making sure they're comfortable and they're confident and can answer some of these questions. Or if maybe it's not a technician that you want to answer some of these questions, maybe it's setting up an appointment so they can have a medication review with the pharmacist. But have that plan of how you want that indirect communication when it happens. You want the plan of how to handle it and how to address it. And or a combination of all those things, right? Like that's also a way to approach it, is quiet confidence as well as direct and in your face. So switching from the direct or indirect approach, I definitely think the messaging, you want to understand what your value is. Like, what is your unique value proposition? What makes you better than Amazon's pill pack? What makes you better than, the GoodRx coupon cards? What makes you better than this cost plus drug company? And that should be a laundry list, right? We know what that is, but do your customers know? So is it your medication synchronization program? Is it the fact that you can deliver directly that day to your customers? Maybe it's a customer loyalty program or a discount card program that you already have. Maybe it's nutrient depletion. I mean, the list kind of goes on and on and on as to what makes your service better than an online, impersonal pharmacy. So, but know what it is and make sure your team knows what it is. Also, what's really important is that you have the relationship with the local prescribing physicians. Cost plus drug company does not know, nor do they care who your patient's customer or physician is. So educate your customers on that fact, that Dr. Smith down the road, and you'll be able to pick up the phone and call him, and he'll actually take your call. So coordinated care is very important, especially if you have any serious health conditions, right? It's much better than fragmented care. And I know Chris had mentioned that in the previous segment. Showcase that. Divvying up your prescriptions and getting one or two piecemeal from place to place, that can be very dangerous depending on what your medical issues are. And then, of course, the access, right? Accessing your pharmacy or your pharmacist, bring questions, accessing your medications. That is something that you have in your neighborhood versus a mail order pharmacy coming, I think, out of Texas. Also, you can strategize and talk about that, the medical history of your patient and their families. That is not something that Cost Plus Drug is going to know about. So, understand that and the importance of that. You might also currently offer a cash option. I've worked with several pharmacies that currently have a very successful cash program currently. And, now that you can actually talk about those sort of things, that your cash price is better than the insured pricing, utilize that and educate your customers that you have a cash program currently. And also, there's definitely an opportunity here, right? You are the expert. You are the caregiver of these customers. So offering a full, complete medication review is going to allow you a couple things. If you're already doing medication synchronization, you're doing these medication reviews for them. But if they're not, that is your opportunity to really get your medication synchronization program very, very solid. The benefits to somebody that are synchronized, they're not walking out of your pharmacy for one medication that's differently priced. Their caregivers are not going to allow them to do that either, right? So definitely use this as an opportunity to increase and improve your medication synchronization, which is going to allow you to therapy optimize. Because there could be a medication in the same drug class that's much less expensive for that patient that is just as beneficial to them. And you could recommend that and just even eliminate that expensive drug, right? So therapy optimization, medication synchronization, that's going to allow you to have some more stickiness factor and to get to know your customers even better. So use this opportunity. What a great way to really show what you can do as a pharmacy. Cost Plus is not going to do that.
Right.
And then also, consider comparing cost plus to all the others that are out there. This is just the $4 Walmart plan. We do that. Or this is the GoodRx discount card program. We have one of those, et cetera. It's a small number of medications that we're talking about, so it really might be much smaller of an impact than some are thinking. But it is an issue. It is not something to stick your head in the sand and just, oh, well, we're going to wash over and not really be concerned about it. Certainly be concerned about it. And, again, have your plan, communicate it to your team, and then communicate it to your customers. And I just want to review very quickly before we move on the things that Chris, I keep calling him Chris, Charlie Hardig, excuse me. Repetition is always important. So I want to go through the list of things that he mentioned on the last segment. Price matching could be an option for you. Creating your own discount card program. Educating your team that this program is considered more of a bait and switch. Educate your team that this program is really not for anyone that's insured, because your copays are typically less than what they're going to offer you the medication at cash price for. Plus, anyone that's on Medicare or Medicaid, they don't even take those. Educate your team on the danger of fragmented care, clinical concerns, and access to their medications and their pharmacist. Address requests to transfer out immediately and talk to your patients around that. And then educate your team to educate local physicians. So they need to understand that adherence can really be affected, which we all know in turn is going to affect the reimbursements of the physicians as well. So they want to be on your team and they want your patients to be adherent. So that's a short list from Charlie Hardig that I wanted to review, because that is, repetition is the way to really make some of this sink in.
Right. For sure. And I love the idea of, not seeing this. I mean, it's not the greatest thing, right? We never want another piece of competition in the market, especially one that has a marketing budget that's bigger than, your operating budget for an entire year, probably over 3 or 4 or 5, depending on the pharmacy. But we can look at it as an opportunity. We don't have to see all of the negatives. We can look at it as an opportunity to open the doors to conversations that patients would not have been open to before, because it's really making it more run of the mill to talk about a cash price model. And for some customers, for some patients, that might be the option. And then really, making it feel a little more okay to toot your own horn. I know, in all my years of working with pharmacies, I really have never had a pharmacist do that. And I'm like, why don't you do it every day? Because what you do is so amazing. So I think that this, it really could be seen as an opportunity if you want to see the bright side, the silver lining kind of thing. So I do want to shift gears a little bit and talk about attrition. And so, that's the worry, right? You lose business. A customer, might ask you to transfer their prescriptions, like Charlie Hardig mentioned in his session with Brad Jones on this topic. Or they might just disappear, because breaking up is hard to do, right? So let's talk about some of the ways that you might be able to recognize attrition if you start to see it in your pharmacy. What can you look for to maybe note that you have a problem?
Absolutely. You got to look at the data, right? Having a system like an RMS point of sale system where you can look at some of these reports is vital, right? Like knowing the customers that are no longer coming back in to make purchases. Why aren't they, right? Did they move? That's reasonable if they moved, but if they're getting it from, a mail order or, Amazon or et cetera, you want to address it and come up with a way to reach out to those customers and tell them how much you want them back. Definitely medication synchronization is a way for you to understand if medications are no longer needed. That's your conversation that you're having every month with your customers that are synchronized. So that's an excellent way to notice if anything has changed. And a lot of times it's changed because, the doctor switched the medication, and that's great. But you got to know that, right? Mm-hmm. You just guesstimate that. And then, of course, there's the customer loyalty. I know that, the points accrual and customers that haven't been in a while is a way to understand who's no longer coming into the pharmacy and why is that, and come up with your plan of how you're going to reach out to those customers.
Right. Yeah. For customer loyalty, I think that's awesome because you should be able to know who your best customers are, right? That's something that every pharmacy should know, who spends the most money. And if they're, if they're not coming in for their prescription anymore, and that's a lot of the real danger is not that you lose the prescription, but you lose that, they came in for their prescription and they also bought, some other necessities. And then you lose those, you lose your supplement sales for nutrient depletion because they're like, well, I know what that is. I'm just going to get it on Amazon instead, right? So if you lose that touch point of that prescription, then you might risk losing other things. So that's really, really important thing to understand.
Well, and also I know that, a lot of customer loyalty is one way to look at it. And then I've worked with some pharmacies over the years that have created a VIP program. So they literally look at who are my most valuable customers, who is getting the most medications from me and who is like my most valuable VIP customer. And that's their VIP program, which is similar yet a little bit different than a customer loyalty program. But I mean, that's all available in your data. You just got to look at your reports.
Just got to look at it. Exactly. Yeah, that's awesome. I love that idea of a VIP program. That's super cool. All right. So kind of one last topic to touch on before we end, and this is probably what Brad imagined I would actually talk about when we came on here. But we're going to talk about marketing. But when we talk about marketing, we aren't really talking about advertising in the traditional sense for an independent business. We're not talking necessarily about lead generation, social and email campaigns. If you run a big pharmacy and you do those things, that's awesome. Yeah. Fabulous. But many of you may not know, I don't actually come from a traditional marketing background. I started as a sales assistant and then I worked in customer success. I'm in marketing today because I wrote an article sometime about 10 years ago that I thought would be helpful and I just kept on writing. So when I approach marketing, that's where my roots are. It's value first, content first. And I think that's where, people say marketing and you're thinking advertisements, you're thinking commercials, radio spots, print ads, and that's maybe a part of it. But for a lot of business, that's not feasible. That's not doable. It's not effective. So let's talk a little bit about some natural paths that pharmacies can use to get their voice out there without, a no marketing approach is what I like to call it.
Yes. Well, I mean, we've already talked about it in terms of knowing what your message is, communicating that message to your team. Your team is your biggest source of marketing. Like that is what happens within the four walls of your pharmacy is the most important piece of your successful business. So consider your marketing program as your internal education and communication program, because that's essentially what it is, right? Everyone that walks in and talks in your pharmacy is a representative of your organization. And so you need them to all have that unified message. And we already talked about that. So that's essentially, the first and most important step is having your team understand what is our message, what value do we bring that this cost plus drug and et cetera, fill in the blank, can't overcome on us. That's the most important piece of it. And then of course, there are ways to, broadcast out some of that messaging on your social media platforms and on your, email type of campaigning. And that's where I think you have a little bit more expertise.
Yeah, I think when it comes to emailing and social, I would say don't get intimidated. Social is not a native thing for me. I'm a bad millennial. I don't spend a lot of time on social media outside of work. But there are some tricks and tips that you can use. Like for social media, it's not, I have to think of something to post every day. Just spend an hour or 30 minutes even a week. And there are lots of like social posting tools that are free or even, really low cost. If anyone's curious about those, you can just reach out to me and I'm happy to provide you a list or let you know what I've had experience with in the past. And they allow you to just queue up, 3 or 4 posts, and you don't have to make them, come to our pharmacy because we're blah, blah, blah. You can make them educational. That's kind of like if you build it, they will come kind of theory that works really well, especially in communities. Like Charlie Harding mentioned, this kind of marketing is really what it's about. It's about, putting, your value out there and letting people, go, oh, they really know what they're talking about. I'd much rather get my prescription from somebody who actually cares about my health, who cares about what else is going on with me besides this single prescription. So that's really helpful. Email is the same way. You can make one template and maybe even just send something once a month, and that keeps your brand fresh in people's minds. So when they're like, hey, I need to, they go to their doctor, like I don't have regular prescriptions that I fill on a regular basis. I don't have any recurring medications right now. But if I go to my doctor and they say, well, you need, to get this prescription for this thing, what's going to pop into my mind first? Obviously for me, it's going to be my local pharmacy because of what I do. But, if my friends or, family, who's foremost in their mind? And if you've sent an email, if you've been on their social feed, then they might think, oh yes, no, don't send me to Walgreens, send me to, send me to Sammy's Pharmacy. That's the local pharmacy, one of the local pharmacies around here in Olympia. So I think that's just valuable to do, but don't worry about spending so much time on it. It doesn't have to be intimidating. It doesn't have to be scary. And if you need tips, I'm always happy to help. And Chelsea, our marketing coordinator, she's around too and we're happy to chat anytime.
Absolutely. And you've already done a lot of this hard work. You've already got some articles that you can follow up with this posting or with our climb session today, so that they've got some of these that they can just tap into, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
So I love it.
Okay.
So go out there. I think everybody, the message to take away is know your value, communicate your value to your team first, and second, communicate it to your customer base. And go slay the dragon.
Yes, agreed. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. Thanks, Emily, for being with us again. And we'll see you again soon.